William Andrews carrying to the tied 10-yard line. Joe Cribbs scored from 5 yards out to make it 7-7 2 plays later. After Alabama went ahead 10-7 on Alan McElroy's 34-yard field goal, Auburn drove with Joe Cribbs running the final 9 yards for the touchdown to put the Tigers in front. It was Auburn 13, Alabama 10 after Portella's point was wide. A William Andrews fumble led to the Tide's next touchdown. Rutledge throwing to Bolton again, this time from 17 out. Alabama took it to the dressing room at halftime, 17-14. In the third quarter, Alabama's Rutledge again. This time, the receiver is Rick Neal, getting into the corner of the end zone. After trading field goals, Alabama's Stedman Shealy on 4th down and 2 at the Auburn 20, faked inside and ran 20 yards for the touchdown that iced the game for Alabama. Alabama 34, Auburn 16. The Tide wins the Southeastern Conference Championship and goes to the Sugar Bowl to play Penn State for the national championship. This is Phil Snow reporting from Legion Field, Birmingham. Behold, SEC Skywriters. They're not much to look at, granted, but they have fought the battle of the Oxford airstrip. They have looked Bear Bryant in the eye, blinking only a time or two. And in 10 days, they have traveled 4,000 miles to see Ballard, Sloan, McClendon, Bryant, McIntyre, Kersey, Majors, Barfield, Pell, and Dooley. If that last sentence makes sense to you, you're a football fan. And you're an invited guest as we take our annual preseason look at Southeastern Conference football.
Always out to this point, right? Huh? Read it on the move.
Emory Ballard, father of the wishbone offense, is the new man at Mississippi State, the 28th head coach at that institution. Ballard, very successful at Texas A&M, left College Station in the middle of the season last year under circumstances so personally sensitive he won't talk about them to this day. Arriving in Starkville in February with recruiting all but over, Ballard has worked feverishly putting together a staff and putting in his wishbone offense. He found surprising talent waiting for him. And the way the Bulldogs are taking to the new system, obviously, Ballard is encouraged.
I think we're making a lot of progress. We've got majority of the things in that we're going to be doing offensively. We're split up our schedules to where we're working on some phases of the game in the morning, some phases of the game in the afternoon, and I think our practices have been very productive. I think the players are adapting rapidly to the triple option concept, whether we're in the wishbone or in the split back arrangements. We've got a lot of work to be done on getting real good at doing what we're doing, but I think our players, by and large, they know what to do.
Emory Ballard is well aware of the presence of perhaps the league's finest receiver, Mobile, Alabama's Marty McDowell. He's promised a fourth option to his famed triple option attack to get the ball to McDowell. Still, with a new head coach, new staff, completely new system, and a schedule that includes all the SEC powerhouses but one, the Bulldogs will be hard-pressed to break even. The great Ole Miss teams of the past were led by great quarterbacks, beginning with Charlie Connolly in the late 40s and ending with Archie Manning over 20 years later. Now there's one in a Rebel uniform that could outdo them all, a brash, cocky French-American 1 year out of New Orleans named John Fourcade, the most recruited athlete in the Southeast in 1978. Coach Steve Sloan, in carefully weighed words, says Fourcade has no weaknesses as a runner or a passer. That's a strong endorsement from a young coach who played, coached, and learned well from the master of the understatement, Alabama's Bear Bryant. The Ole Miss love affair with Sloan is still soaring in his second year, sparked to even greater heights after the Rebels, led by Forcade in his first start, routed Mississippi State 27-7 to close out last season.
We think our offensive team will be much improved over last year. We have quite a few returning people if we're able to stay healthy. Defensively, we're quite inexperienced. We have what you might term an inexperienced front with very little depth. Our secondary should be improved over last year. We have most people back, plus one of our players who played well early who was injured in the second game and got a hardship case, Joel Stewart. So I think our secondary will be improved. How fast our defensive front comes along, I think, will determine the way our defense plays early in the season.
What kind of progress is John Forcade making as quarterback?
Well, we feel like John did real well at the last game of the season last year. He had an outstanding spring. He's come back in pretty good shape this fall, and he looks good along with Roy Coleman.
While the Rebel offense is expected to be strong, defense could be lacking. The Skyriders predict a finish in the middle of the pack. LSU coach Charlie McClendon is preparing the troops for his 18th campaign. It will be his last. Why a coach who has won 70% of his games and has taken his teams bowling 12 times in 17 seasons is being forced out is a question only the innermost circle of LSU officialdom can answer, but won't. Charlie Mack has apparently put the deep disappointment behind him now, and it's preseason business as usual in Tiger Town.
I've talked with my players about our situation. There's not anything that can be done about it. You know, the 17 seniors, myself, I said, we are now seniors. This is our last year. It really doesn't make any difference who the next coach is going to be as far as we're concerned. And for the returning athletes, they should be very concerned. They ought to be able to play their best. So I'm a little bit confused about the lame duck situation. I think we're going to have a tough time regardless of whether this will be my last year or my first year or whatever, because our schedule is about as tough as we've ever had it at LSU, and there's a lot of things that's going to happen for us to have success.
The Tigers returned their quarterback tandem of David Woodley and Steve Ensminger, and Charlie Mack is counting on that senior leadership. Charles Alexander, Charlie the Great, is gone. The task of filling his spot has fallen to Hokie Guy John. Hokie will give it his all, but there's no way he can give the Bengals the running threat they had last year. A depleted offensive line and the toughest schedule in years may make Charlie Mack's swan song a little off-key. But we'll miss him. We hope he proves us wrong. Being a Vanderbilt Commodore in recent years can be likened to driving up behind a motorcycle pack of Hell's Angels and suddenly your horn gets stuck. 3 straight 2-9 seasons sent Fred Pankos packing. New athletic director Roy Kramer brought in a Steve Sloan assistant, George McIntyre. It's probably more than coincidence that McIntyre was with Sloan at Vandy when the Commodores made their only bowl trip in the last quarter century. The problem remains the same at Vanderbilt. Not enough quality players.
Well, I think we have probably 25, 26 first-rate players that can play in our league, and if we don't get people hurt, I think we'll be able to compete. Of course, I think you need about 45 in order to go through a season and feel like you're not, depleted at any position when you do get hurt. We have 3 or 4 very outstanding players. Frank Mordecai, running back, super, and we have a great receiver in Preston Brown and a good defensive back in Ronnie Myrick and a couple of real fine offensive linemen. So I think that, those people can compete on any level. I just wish we had more like them.
Vanderbilt plans to recruit the exceptional student who also happens to be an exceptional player. To do that, they'll have to cover the nation to find enough, and that will take money. A high-powered fundraiser has been brought in to fill the recruiting coffers.
Our recruiting is really spread out now. We've gone all spring to Cleveland and Cincinnati and New York City, and far west is Houston and Dallas, and down into Miami and Atlanta and so forth. So we're trying to put our plus out, which is a great university that's academically is well known throughout the country. So we need to approach those type of young men with the idea of coming and playing for us here.
The long-range plan shows promise, but in the meantime, Vandy will still be trying to play in the SEC with Ivy League talent. Trouble is brewing in Lexington, Kentucky. 8 Wildcat players, several starters among them, were charged with rape last winter. The charges never got past the grand jury, but the negative publicity damaged the Cats. Coach Fran Kersey suspended the 8, saying they had violated team rules. Now, with only 71 scholarship players left, Kersey is saying he'll put his own name up for Coach of the Year if they can win 5 games.
We think the University of Kentucky this year football team is probably the thinnest as far as personnel in many, many years, and we're not making any special complaints about it. It's just a fact, and we have only 71 players on the field that are on scholarship, of which 40 of them are freshmen, to include the redshirt freshmen. So we're starting this thing all over again. We've had some success in the past, and we think we know what we're doing, and it's going to be one of those kind of years we have to struggle a little bit. But we're willing to get through that in order for us to get our program back on the same keel that we've been the last couple of years.
Would the 8 players that you suspended have made a difference in this season?
The 8 players that we suspended obviously would have made a tremendous difference, especially in the offensive backfield. We don't have one back that's ever started a football game around here. We only have one that's even played in it. So it's hurting us in that position, but I'm not looking back. I went ahead and made the decision. I'm sticking with it, and we're going to work ourselves around it.
Kentucky will be forced to start a 5th-year quarterback who has played only 30 downs in his career, not the stuff of which championships are made. Neyland Stadium, home of the Tennessee Vols, seats 80,250. That's not enough. They're going to add 10,000 more. And the man under the gun to fill those seats is Tennessee's own Johnny Majors. This is the 3rd year for the former Vol tailback, and the fans are getting a bit restless.
I think we've come a good distance. I think we're on, a program that I think we can build a winner, and I hope we start winning this year more. I hope that we believe we can have a winning football team this year. I see an improvement in our attitude initially. I see better strength on our squad. I see a better attitude. I think I see better potential leadership. We haven't put the pads on here yet in practice, but I would be very disappointed, and I don't plan to be disappointed if we weren't better than last year and our attitude improved each year at Tennessee.
To win big this year, and some believe he must, Majors will look to his senior quarterback, Jimmy Streeter, a frail young man but extremely quick and a good passer. Streeter will be throwing to the best tight end in the league, senior Reggie Harper. But the Vols must find wide receivers to have the deep threat. Major says the defense must improve at several positions for them to challenge for the title. The early schedule is favorable, Boston College and Utah, before that first major hurdle, and a big one, Auburn, on September 29th in Neyland Stadium. Florida Field, site of many memorable battles, but never has an SEC championship flag hung from its standards. The reason why there's a 3rd new face among the SEC head coaching fraternity this year. Florida reached deep and hired Alabama native Charlie Pell after 2 brilliant seasons at Clemson. Pell knows what's expected. He knows how close Doug Dickey came before he was fired. He knows of the distractions that the Florida sun and sand can bring. Yet he knows Florida's 9 million residents make it a recruiting gold mine, and the warm climate in winter can entice northern blue chippers when nothing else can. With all that going for him, Pell's immediate concern is attitude. He's trying to make the game important to players and to fans. He's stressing the importance of being a good citizen as well as a good football player. And he's looking among 45 returning lettermen for some winning players.
Well, we've got to find out who our best quarterback is, and We have people, John Brantley, Tim Groves, and Tyrone Young, who are obviously our best three. That'll come in focus within the next week. The other thing we've got to do is find some depth. We've got to find some freshmen, sophomores, or juniors, or seniors, or fifth-year redshirts who haven't played before and haven't been able to compete for playing time. We've got to find those kind of people, step up front, and be ready to help us by the time we go to Houston.
The Gators have talent. Chris Collingsworth may be the best wide receiver in the league, but the question of who will throw the ball to him has not been settled. The Gators have 3 tough conference games on the road and Alabama at home. The Skyriders are thinking break even for Charlie Pell's first season in Gatorland. Vince Dooley, 15 years at Georgia, has reason to be smiling. He has a talented football team. He has an excellent coaching staff, perhaps the best in the league. The only thing he may not have this year is luck. He figures he used it all up last season when the Dogs won 9 games.
Well, the 9-2-1 team, in the 15 years that I've been here, probably was the most fortunate and some might say lucky team that we've ever had. When you consider the fact that in 5 games the difference was 6 points, 2 one-point victories and 2 two-point victories. When you consider the fact that we stayed healthy throughout the season, that most every decision we made was a good one, then I think that's probably the most fortunate team we've ever had. This team, this year, has the potential as the year moves on maybe to be a better football team. Now, for us to be as fortunate as we were a year ago, I think would defy all the odds. I think it would be very impractical. It would be too much to hope for. So last year, we won 9 football games. I think the best record that we've ever had in the 15 years, the most satisfying team. This team could be better. I don't think the record will be as good.
The Georgia Dogs have the best quarterback tandem in the league, senior Jeff Pyburn, who led them from behind time after time last year. And sophomore Buck Ballou, one of the highly touted prospects who apparently is going to live up to the reputation that preceded him. Dooley will have to decide before the start of the season who will be his number 1 quarterback. Every coach would like to have such a problem. Then there's Lindsey Scott, whose kickoff returns and touchdown catches ignited the Dogs time after time last year. He has big play written all over him. About the only problem on offense is at tailback. How do you replace Willie McClendon, the SEC Player of the Year? Defense will be questionable early because of experience, but the horses are there, and Dooley believes they'll be good the last half of the season. Total that up, and you have to place the Georgia Dogs in the SEC penthouse. Auburn's Doug Barfield and his players must have thick hides by now. They've battled uphill for 3 years while the NCAA investigated and rumors of impending doom flew. Now those first recruits are seniors. NCAA probation, if unpalatable, is at least known and accepted, and the Tigers are suddenly a talented and experienced football team.
One of the best, hopefully. You know, I think everybody's trying to be the best. But I see somebody's got to unseat Alabama and Georgia. They look like the pick of the litter to me. I think there's several of us that are going to fall in there behind them somewhere and try to shoot for the moon, so to speak. Tennessee, Mississippi State, Florida, Ole Miss, I think those are going to be good football teams too. I can't speak for the others, but I don't know how good that we're going to be. I hope we're going to be a good football team, and I think there are a lot of variables there. We've got to keep our people healthy and on the field. We're looking for a lot of leadership from our seniors, and I think those are important things that will decide how good we are going to be.
The anticipation of seeing James Brooks and Joe Cribbs in the same backfield has the Auburn alums doing cartwheels. Without the great blocking back, the Tigers will make use of the great breakaway talent of their 2 speedsters by employing more triple option football. Another determining factor there is the skill and intelligence of senior quarterback Charlie Trotman, who has all the tools a Veer-type quarterback must have. If Trotman, Brooks, and Cribb stay healthy, opposing defenses will have their hands full. The Tiger offensive line has a way to go in jump rope, but in blocking, they can get the job done. The defensive front is the strongest at Auburn in years, led by All-American candidate Frank Warren, 6'5", 267 pounds, and quick. Marshall Riley, another big mobile lineman, will man a tackle spot. Dennis Rogers will figure in there heavily. At nose, the Tigers will have two capable players, sophomore Edmund Nelson and junior Marvin Williams. The linebackers will be seniors Harris Rayburn and Freddie Smith. Freddie Smith's return to form could be a key. Another key is the recovery of secondary all-stars James McKinney and Clifford Toney. Both appear to be fully recovered from injury. Charles Wood's hoped-for return by the Tennessee game will give the Tigers good defense on the flanks. Auburn can't go bowling, so they'll have to be satisfied with denying some opponents that postseason prerogative. This play, and several others, made Alabama the national champions last year. Now, one would think that after Bear Bryant's 5th national title, a rebuilding period should follow. But Tide fans know Bear doesn't rebuild, he just reloads. It's hard to convince anyone that the Tide isn't loaded again, particularly since Bryant, the athletic director, has traded last year's foes Nebraska, Washington, Southern Cal, and Missouri for Baylor, Georgia Tech, Wichita State, and Miami. The venerable coach grudgingly concedes his team a chance at repeating.
Oh, I think you always have a chance, but they certainly don't look like anything now as a national champion. I think they've done well. I think they worked hard, but we're not as far along as we were last year when we played Nebraska.
The injury situation has been more severe?
Yeah, and I think it'll be that way now because we have fewer players. With the limits on, you have fewer quality players. We do.
Alabama will be strong in the trenches, particularly on offense, where the entire front returns, with Dwight Stevenson, Mike Brock, and Jim Bunch, and several others. They're devastating. Tony Nathan is missing from the wishbone backfield, but there's plenty of talent there. And at quarterback, it's Stedman Shealy, who refused to give in to a badly damaged knee, working as hard as anyone ever has to return to form.
Well, I've talked about him. I read about him. He's a bright young man. He's a wonderful person. He's a good Christian athlete. He's worked harder than anyone I've ever seen to get well, to get his injury well. I don't know how well he is. He thinks he's all right. He was the quickest quarterback I'd ever been around when he was a sophomore. I thought he was going to be the most productive quarterback we'd ever had, meaning, of course, that putting points on the board. He's not a picture passer. I think he's an adequate passer. I think he's a winner. What else you want me? Anything good you think of? Well, I'd say about him. I just hope he's able to play.
If Stedman Shealy holds together and those nagging injuries among the defensive people subside, the Tide fans will be thinking Jackson Square, red beans and rice, the French Quarter, and the Superdome when December rolls round. Recapping the Skywriters preseason poll, Alabama to take it all again. That would be 7 championships in 8 years. Georgia, a strong second. The Dogs could win it since they don't have to play Alabama. Auburn can't win it officially, but they will have a lot to say about who does. Tennessee and Florida, the SEC dark horses this year. The second division, it will be Ole Miss, Mississippi State, LSU, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky. Some other observations. Ole Miss quarterback John Fourcade may be the most exciting player in the league in several years. The expected bad year at Kentucky could be the undoing of Coach Fran Kersey. And don't be surprised to see Charlie McClendon stay in football after he leaves LSU. It's possible he could stay in the SEC. That's the way the Skywriters saw it this year. And if Old Tailspin Scobie will take her into Oxford again next year, we'll be looking for you then. This is Phil Snow reporting. Thank you, and thanks to our sponsor, the Mutual Savings Life Insurance Company.